Hi, Dr. Henry. I'm glad you're back. Hopefully, John will rejoin. I'm not sure. Like I said, he's usually the only student that's here, and I'm just gonna be talking to him about the project, making sure that he's on track and answering any questions that he has. Um, Last week when we met, we pretty much finished up all the units that I wanted to cover before spring break. And the project is the key assignment that they're working on over spring break to have done when we return.
Okay.
So, they've gone through the process of finding an article, but what we haven't discussed in detail is the actual summary that they're writing. And so tonight is the night that I explain that to them in detail and share the picture templates that I have available for them and all of that, so that they have a really good, strong feel for how the project is to be organized and structured using APA format, which most of them have never used before.
Right. I bet.
Yeah, so hopefully John will come back. In the meantime, I am playing around with the screen share function, so trying to make sure I can do this when and if he returns.
Okay. Sounds
Yeah.
good. No problem. Do what you have to do. I'm fine.
All right, thank you.
No, thank you.
Hi, Landon. I'm glad you could join in. Bear with me in just a moment. We'll get started. John was here earlier, so I'm trying to give a few minutes to see if he'll return. Okay. That Can everybody hear me okay? I'm not sure if you're hearing me. Anybody? Please unmute. Let me know if you're hearing me. Okay. Okay. Thank you for that. Because I wasn't real sure. All right. So I think I have a way we can do this. Just bear with me for a second. I'll get into the actual project file because that's my goal tonight, is to continue our discussion on the project. Could you let me know if you're seeing my screen at all right now? I'm actually scrolling through some files to show you the project information, and I wanted to know if you can actually see that.
We cannot.
You cannot see my screen.
No.
Okay, because it's telling me that I'm sharing. So let me try again. Okay. Actual, okay. So are you seeing anything now? I'm going to try to open an actual document. Maybe that's the issue. You know, not showing the doc. Let me try opening a document. See if I can get into something here now. All right. So give me just a few. It's loading up the documents here. And I think once I open one, maybe you'll be able to see that. So let's see if that works. Okay. Tell me if you're seeing like a visual of a whiteboard.
Yep.
Oh, great. Finally, I did something right here. Okay. All right. So let me back up one and see. Now that I know that that is working. So what you see on the board here is what I drew is like what your first page has to look like, okay, in terms of the writing, all right? So you can see on the far left side that I have a note that says, I want you to use APA style for all the margins and spacing, all right? So in APA format, the margin is 1 inch all around, and standard is double spacing. Well, if you looked through the project details, it told you that the requirement is that you're using double spacing, okay? Now, because this is your first introduction to APA format, I'm not having you do all of the things that APA requires, because I felt like for the short summary that you're writing, you know, it's 2 pages long, double spaced, tight, it would be a bit much to have you do everything that APA requires. So I'm trying to introduce you to APA in a way that's not overwhelming, right? So if you're using 1 inch all around margin and double spacing with a few exceptions, I think that'll be a good way to kind of introduce you to APA, okay? And so the exception is that in the upper left corner, you can see that on the screen actually, it says that you're doing an ID block, right? I have the words ID block there. and you see the 4 elements that will comprise your ID block. That's your name, of course, the course name, which is, you know, Physical Science 1, or you can use the course numbering, Phsc 1010, section S01, and that, you know, that's helpful to know what section you're in. That's why I have that listed, because that makes identifying, you know, where I need to focus the grading of your project. That's helpful to know what course and what section you're in. My name, of course, and then the date that you're submitting the assignment. And I have that ID block as single space so that it doesn't eat up too much of the first page. Okay. A lot of times when students actually create the ID block, they double space it. I want you to do that in a single space format. Okay. Now, sometimes also students will create a cover page. It's perfectly fine if you have one, but that does not substitute for how I want you to do your first page, with the ID block in the upper left corner, and then space between the ID block, and then you should give your summary a title. Okay. Don't use the title of the article as the title for your summary, because, well, it's your summary. The title of the belongs to the author, not. So you should be creating a title that reflects what the content of your summary. Okay, and then after your title, now in APA format, if you you know, have looked at any of the resources that I provided you in the project details, you will see that for APA format, you don't put a lot of extra space between the title and your first sentence. It's actually just standard double spacing. And newer version of APA format requires they actually bold the title. It used to be that they didn't, but in the versions, most recent versions that I've looked at, the title is bolded. So whatever title you give your summary, you should bold it, and then it's standard double spacing from that point forward, and you'll start your first paragraph. Okay. Now, in the project details, I've given to you the format for your first sentence, and I'll explain my reasoning, but I'll explain the first sentence to you again. In the first sentence, you should put, and this is verbatim of what you can use for your first sentence. I am summarizing the article named, and that's where you put your article name, written by, and then you put the author, in the year, and then you put the year that it was published. Okay. Now, it might seem strange that, you know, for a summary, I'm giving you your first sentence, right? But pretty much that's all I'm giving you, you know, in terms of the actual summary itself. But the reason I'm doing that is so that right from the start, you have clearly identified the source for the summary that you're going to be writing. Okay. So it means that from after that first sentence, everything else is you, in your own words, telling me what the article that you got approved is all about. Okay. Remember, one of the key requirements for this summary is that you explain to me what that article is about in your own words as best as you understand. I get it. The articles that you're utilizing are very technical. They have a lot of math formulas in many instances. Some of those things may you know, pose some challenges for you to really comprehend at a first glance. And we talked about the idea that you are free to use other tools and resources to help you understand the article, but your task is to tell me what the article is about. As I said before in our discussion, I'm not so much interested in how you figured out what the article is about as I am in having you tell me in your own words as best as you can explain what the article is about, right? So after that first sentence, everything after that should be you paraphrasing in your own words what the article is about. The other key requirement is that you tell me how the things you're reading and reviewing in that article relate to the material and content that we've been dealing with in class, right? And think about it, we've covered a great many topics up to this point. I know some of you have as your topic area astronomy, right? And true enough, we haven't got to the astronomy content yet, but that content is something that you are going to be looking at and reviewing and reading on your own. It's not something that I'm going to read to you and review in class. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have about it, but it deals with things like black holes, how the universe was formed, what are stars, those kinds of topics, which make for great reading, but I'm not going to read that portion of the textbook or the resources that are provided. It's something you can review and utilize as you need, especially when establishing any connection. So for example, let's say you are using an astronomy article that deals with black holes. Well, it would be fair game to say, that part of the material that we are utilizing in class deals with black holes, and then tell me, what in the article relates to that content. Okay. So, but again, the major piece is that you don't want to get yourself in trouble copying or plagiarizing from the article, right? The project details explain to you if you are quoting that you have to properly quote by putting the content that you're copying verbatim in quotation marks, and then putting the page where you got the material from in parentheses. Now that is a little bit different than the way APA requires you to do your citations, in-text citations. But here's the thing, you're not using multiple sources for this project, so you don't have to use in-text citations in the typical way that they do. You only have to cite page numbers where you quote it from if you quote. I've told you in the discussions that we've had that quoting is okay in a limited fashion, but if more than 20% of a 2-page summary is quoted, then you're probably relying too much on material and content from the article verbatim, right? So I kind of use an 80-20 rule to gauge whether you're doing due diligence in terms of telling me what the article is about in your own words, right? So if you're once you have that first sentence laid out, you're ready to paraphrase everything else in your own words. I had a student ask me once before, what's a good way to do that? Well, my suggestion to you is, if you're new to this whole idea of paraphrasing, take each paragraph, read it, do as much as you have to help you digest it, and then tell me in a simple sentence what that paragraph is about. And if you do that consistently throughout the article, you should have more than enough content to make 2 pages or to do a 2-page summary, because I mandated that your article be at least 15 pages long. So, and that was because I knew that if the article wasn't sufficiently long enough, you would not be able to do a summary that would meet the requirements that I've laid out. Okay. So now you've got your first sentence, you're paraphrasing things in your own words, you see a note there with an asterisk beside it saying no in-text citation needed, citations needed. And again, that is because you have referenced your source right in the first sentence, and everything after that is in your own words, except for maybe a limited quote here or there. And so you don't have to keep referring to saying, mentioning the author or the article name, because you told me that right in your first sentence. Okay. Let me see if I can bring up, well, you see here, I do have a picture here of the kind of structure for the reference page. So at the top, you'll have references. It is bolded, but it's not in big letters. It's just in standard 12-point font. You skip space appropriately, standard double space, and then you begin your citation in APA format for your article. That is the only thing that belongs on your reference page, because it is the only allowable source for this summary. You're not using other tools. You're not summarizing other sources. You're only summarizing the article, okay? So you will do a citation for your article in APA format on the reference page. Now, here's the thing. If you use one of the three sources that I provided, the college's electronic databases, the open source repository, Hindawi, or the app, the researcher app, no, excuse me, XRVIT app, all of those sources have a formatting tool that will allow you to cite your source in APA format, and then it's just simply a cut and paste. You have to remember, however, that in APA format, and if you looked at any of the sources or examples that are provided in the project details, you'll see that it uses a hanging indent. And that hanging indent is to the left. I've seen a lot of students indent the citation to the right, which is not correct. It's a hanging indent to the left. Okay, so just be mindful of that. And for sure, while you're working on your actual summary, you can always reach out to me and ask any questions that you might have. Okay, I have one more picture that I want to show you, but just bear with me. I'm going to bring it up. Okay. In the meantime, if you have any questions, feel free to either post them in the chat, because I am looking at that. And Landon, I see you put in a chat that you were having trouble hearing me. Is that better now? I don't know if that means it's better, because I didn't see any response in the chat. John, I know you have access to a microphone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I wanted to make sure that I hadn't been talking for the last 20 minutes and nobody was hearing me. Okay, so I'm gonna stop the share, and then I'm gonna bring up another picture here that we can take a look at. Right. Now that shows everything that I've talked about so far, and then it also shows some information about what the right side of your first page looks like. So you can see that I put an abbreviated header. Normally, APA format requires this long running header, which would be great if you're writing like a 5-6 page paper or something much longer. But you're only writing a 2-page summary for me, right? 2 pages, type, double space, pretty much. And so I'm asking that you use an abbreviated header instead, with your last name and the page number in the upper right corner. Okay, so you don't need that long running header across the entire page. Also, you don't need to write an abstract. Okay. An abstract, if you look closely at your article, you notice one of the first things they do is an abstract, and that abstract basically summarizes what the article is about. Well, you're writing a summary, so you don't need an abstract and a summary because your summary is already a kind of abstract. All right. And then the last note that I put for you there says, put 4 to 5 sentences on a 3rd page in order to meet the length requirement. What am I saying there, right? Your summary has to be 2 pages long, not on 2 pages. Okay. So from your first sentence, which I've already, given you, to your last period should be 2 pages long. Well, in order to do that, it means you have to compensate for the space that you use for the ID block, the title, and so forth. And so if you put, 4 to 5 sentences on a 3rd page, that will, help to meet that 2-page length requirement. Okay. Do all of you, do you follow what I'm saying there?
Yeah. Make
Okay.
sure it's 2 full
Yeah.
pages.
Right. Because here's what typically happens. Students will, the first page, they'll have the ID block, the title, and then they'll consider that along with whatever they put in terms of the summary on page 1, and then they'll do a page 2, and they'll stop at the bottom of page 2 or near the bottom of page 2, and then they think that's long enough.
Yeah, pretty much missed the first quarter of the first page,
Right, exactly. So, I always tell students, hey, I'm asking you to pay me back for the stuff that you did on page 1 that wasn't part of the actual summary. So yeah, that's what why I'm having you put those 4 to 5 sentences on a 3rd page. Let me see if I can I'll stop share, and I have one other document that I want to show you. Unfortunately, I can't get into the share is not cooperating with me to go into Canvas on there, but I think I can I have some prior project documents that I've put out, and I'll bring up one of those and show you some of the resources that I've made available to you, and we can go from there. All right, bear with me. I'm trying to get into, find out. There we go. Okay. So now, I wanted to do my due diligence and make sure that everybody was clear on this idea of plagiarism, right? And I get it. This is, even though this is a short summary, I apologize. I'm sure y'all hear the weather outside. Hopefully I don't, well, I'm in my car, so I'm pretty good. I know this is a fairly short summary, and sometimes students get the idea because it's so short that they can wait until the last minute to get it done, right? And so this is part of why I'm talking about this again at this point, because I figure that most of you will, let me say this, if you're really being diligent, will work on this over spring break. And I want to make sure that you don't fall into that trap of plagiarism, because that will cost you all of your points and you'll get a 0 on a project. And this is 20% of your grade, right? So you want to do, a good job on this, right? And so sometimes students think that the only way you can plagiarize is if you copy something word for word. And that's absolutely not true, okay? So I have some examples of some types of plagiarism You know, the issue with plagiarism is that it's basically taking somebody else's ideas and passing them off as your own, which is, you know, idea stealing, right? You can't do that, all right? Well, they list here, you know, like you turn in somebody else's work word for word. Well, we know that that's not allowable, right? But sometimes students fall into the trick of thinking that, oh, if I don't copy it word for word, if I just change a few words to some synonyms, for example, then I'll be okay. Well, that's absolutely not okay, because you're still basically taking the author's idea and intent as your own. Okay. So you see here that potluck paper. The writer tries to disguise plagiarism by copying from several different sources, tweaking the sentences to make them fit together while retaining most of the original phrasing. We can't do that. Now you only have one source, but still, you know, tweaking the sentences, that's not allowable. Okay. Yeah, so you see here, and then this poor disguise says, although the writer has retained the essential content of the source, he or she has altered the paper's appearance slightly by changing keywords and phrases, right? So let me give you the perfect example. Let's say in your article, there's a compound sentence, right? So there's a, you know, a sentence, then a comma, then and, or some other type of preposition. And then after that, you know, you've got another complete sentence or another complete idea. And what I see students do is take what's behind the comma and put it in front, and take what was originally in front and put it behind the comma. And I always tell students that is, that's not proper paraphrasing, okay? You know, I call that paracheating, right? So you want to avoid doing that kind of swapping things around, but not really putting it in your own words. And you know, so that's why I offer the suggestion of trying to go through the paper paragraph by paragraph. Now, these are long articles, right? So that's a time-consuming process, which is why, you know, you had to have your article approved some time ago, and you were encouraged to go ahead and start the reading process, so that now that we're talking about the writing process, you're ready to begin that whole process. Okay. Because, you know, the more you feel pressured, the more there might be a temptation to just go ahead and copy. And, you know, I've had students to tell me, well, I just hoped you wouldn't catch it, right? Well, I always tell students, it's not that I'm trying to be the plagiarism police, and I'm definitely not as skilled as some of the ways students get away with things as maybe English professors are, because they do this more regularly than I do. But I always tell students, this is kind of like speeding, right? The police don't catch everybody that's speeding, but they might catch you, right? So I might not catch everybody for every single thing that they plagiarize over the course of the several hundred papers that I might have to grade, but I might catch you. And that's what you have to be concerned about, right? So you want to do due diligence there, okay? And so, you know, just, you know, the surefire way of avoiding all of that is just to do this in your own words as best as you can. I don't expect that you will be 100% understand every single thing in the article, and you might be a little off in what you do understand. But the idea is that you are making an honest attempt to tell me what that article is about in your own words, and tell me in your own words how it connects to the class. Now, you know, the other thing too is that, remember, if you're in lecture and lab, you have two separate projects to do. And I don't know if either of you fall into that category, but you know, that's the requirements, right? Each class has its own project. So any questions about any of that?
I don't think so.
Okay. All right. So I'm gonna stop the share and then I'm gonna share a document again. I'm glad I figured this much out. Okay. So I think we, as far as the finding the article goes, oh, let's see if I can. Seems like it only wants to do one page at a time. So let me stop. Oh, there we go. I was able to get that to go there. Okay, now don't so I think I already talked to you guys about the fact that, you know, if you didn't have your article approved, the consequences of that, which you can still do the project, but you lost, you would be losing points right from the start. But I wanted to show you this page here because I have some resources. You can see some links that are bookmarked there, the apa.org link. That's a website that's really good for learning more about APA. I don't know if I can click on it and have it open because I'm in the sharing document mode, right? Let me see if I stop share and I share a website. Gotta type it right, ORG. So you should be seeing that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So let me just so you can see here that APA, that's the American Psychological Association. They kind of set the standards for scientific kind of publications, if you will, right? Like peer-reviewed articles that you're using for your project. Okay. And there is a portion that talks about APA on this website. It talks about you know, like, so there's a section that, you know, gives you information about the organization itself. There is a section in here that talks about the like APA formatting and what have you. But I honestly, I bookmarked that website so that you would know something about the organization that I utilize to, you know, set the standards for your summary. More than anything, these other websites that I have bookmarked from OWL Purdue are more useful. I consider them more student friendly. And that is because there's actually a sample paper. And there's a link to it here, the sample paper in APA format. I don't know if I can copy that. Let me see, owlenglish.purdue.edu. Let me see if I can bring that up. I think I copied that right. I have that right. Let's see. I'm writing that. Okay. Try it again. Yeah, it's having a moment to load. So maybe I won't be able to bring that one up for you. Yeah, it's wanting to freeze up there. Yeah, it's saying it. I can't get, maybe probably because I typed the website wrong, but let me see if I can get back to you on Zoom. If that is not, oh, there we go. Stop share. Okay. Let's see if I got another document that I can bring up. But anyway, that Our Produce site is, I consider to be more student friendly because you can actually take a look at a sample paper. Now, just be mindful of the fact that there are some things in APA format that I've already told you that you aren't going to be doing, like in-text citations. You won't be utilizing those. You don't need a running header. You know, normally our ID block is not something that you will put on page 1, but for me, you will be. And again, all of that is because you're doing a small, you know, a short paper for me, okay? You will have to include a full copy of the article as well, okay? And don't worry about the due date that's listed there. Again, I'm bringing this document up because I can't bring up the one I have on Canvas. You know that the due date for your summary is actually published in the course on Canvas already. But you do have to include a full copy of the article with your submission. And sometimes students just attach the same copy of the article that they sent to me for approval. Or if you didn't have a copy of the article, but you sent a link, they include the link to the article. The only thing I would tell you about a link is be careful, because just like when you sent for approval, if I told you I couldn't open the link, if you send that same link with your submission, I won't be able to open that link either. And I need a full copy of the article to be able to utilize while I'm grading, because I'm looking at what you wrote and I'm looking at the article. Number one, to make sure you didn't copy anything. And number two, I'm just looking at the content, reviewing the content of what you put in your summary to see how, you know, look to see how well it corresponds to what's in the actual article. Okay. Again, it's worth 100 points, and that's 20% of your grade. And I do have in this folder here a copy of the rubric, which this rubric is also available on Canvas in the project information, right? So the way the scoring on this project works, and I'll be sure to try to talk about this one more time before you have to turn it in. That's always, the scoring is always the last thing I like to do, but I like to at least start talking about it now, so that while you're doing your summary, you have this in the back of your mind. Okay, so the summary is worth 100 points. So what I did was I took that 100 points and I broke it down into 5 categories. So 5 categories with a maximum of 20 points in each category. Okay. And so you can see that I took those 20 points and I broke it down in terms of good, fair, and poor. Okay. Now, what I like to focus on here, since you're in the writing phase now, is what you need to do a good job, right? I always say I don't need to tell students how to do a bad job at this. They pretty much figure that out on their own. But let me give you some ideas about how you can do a good job so that you can incorporate these tips as part of your writing process, okay? So in the summary category, as I've stated earlier, I'm looking to see that the summary is in your own words, okay? That you're not using a whole lot of technical jargon, that you're breaking down the article to me. I always say in layman's terms, in simple terms, tell me what the article is about. The main ideas of the article, excuse me, without including a whole bunch of sub details or minute details that really don't add value to understanding the big concepts that are covered in the article. Also in the summary category, I'm looking to see that you don't overquote, okay? Because if you're overquoting, that means that it's not written in your own words, okay? So any questions about that summary category?
Oh, good. I don't think so.
Okay. Connections to lecture. So as I said, that another main task for this project is that you connect the ideas and topic areas that you're finding in the article to the concepts and ideas that we've covered in class. So let me give you some examples of how you might do that, okay? So all of the articles are written in format that, if you really look at it, follows closely to the scientific method, right? And that was something that we discussed and talked about early on in the course, because that is kind of like a foundational idea across all of science, but and it's important for us as well, especially because a key aspect of that is experimentation. And many of the articles that you're reviewing and summarizing directly relate to some types of experiments that are being performed, okay? And so it wouldn't be unreasonable for you to be able to identify in your article, for example, what is the hypothesis that they're utilizing in the work. We talked about a key aspect of the scientific method is, the experimental process in terms of what is the independent variable and dependent variable. What is a control that they might be using as part of their experimental process? So those key aspects. What are some major conclusions? Because that's part of like the big ideas, right? That's also a key aspect of the scientific method. So it wouldn't be unreasonable for you to point out some key areas in your article that relate directly to the scientific method, as we've discussed it in class, right? We've covered a lot of different conceptual areas in the class. So for example, we dealt with Newton's law, things like gravity. We dealt with things like kinematics, speed, velocity, acceleration. We've looked at circular motion. We've looked at projectile motion. We've looked at oscillatory motion, collision. Maybe you see some of those things being referred to in your article. So it would be fair game for you to point out that they're using, whatever concepts or quantities or properties that they're utilizing in an article that we've utilized in the class, and explain, how are they using it in a similar way or a different way than what we've discussed. For example, they might be measuring energy, but they might be using different units. They may not, we focus heavily on mechanical energy, but they might be using things like nuclear energy or thermal energy, because we talked about that as well. That's part of the unit on temperature, heat, thermodynamics. Maybe they're using thermal energy in a way that connects directly to the kinds of things we talked about, the heat transfer process, but maybe not, right? So, okay, so you wanna, like, if you see things that are related to what we talked about in class, I would say you can compare them or contrast them. How is it alike what we talked about? How is it different? Okay. So, those are just some tips. Another big idea that we focused on heavily in our course was measurement, right? And so this whole idea of the things that they might be measuring, how are they communicating those measurements? What units are they utilizing? Are they focusing on metric units, or are they using a different unit system, right? So those are some areas where you might establish some connections to the lecture class. If you're working in lab, you will be establishing connections as well, but based on the topics that are being dealt with in the lab in terms of the experiments and the lab report. I always say that, you know, in a lab class, error analysis is an area that you might key in on. What type of error analysis are they performing on the measurements that they've made? How are they expressing that error? But, you know, for lecture class, we primarily focus on units and measurement and the units that go along with the measurements, especially in the SI or metric system. Okay. Any questions about that?
I think that covered it.
Okay. So now article choice. I always tell students, this is the one category where you could possibly get a freebie. If you got your article approved, then you already made a good choice. So the 20 points in that category are yours. The only way you lose them is if you plagiarize. If you plagiarize, you lose all points. You know, I once had a student ask me, couldn't they keep the 20 points for getting the article approved because they did that before they plagiarized? And the answer is no, because if you plagiarize, you forfeit all points. Okay. But if you didn't get your article approved, if you're doing the project, but you're working with an article that I did not, you know, directly give you approval to utilize, then you lose the 20 points in that category. Okay. So it's kind of an all or none. If you got it approved, you got the 20 points. If you didn't, you lost the 20 points. Now, just be mindful though, for those of you who might be working with an article that's not approved, if it turns out that you use a source for this summary that would not have met standards, meaning it's not peer reviewed, it's not long enough, or it's not on an appropriate topic, then you automatically forfeit all the points and get a 0. Because if you're not summarizing an article that meets those qualifications that are clearly spelled out in the project details, then you aren't doing the project. Summarizing something else, but it's not appropriate for the guidelines established for this project. So I think I'm almost certain that I remember talking to John about, you know, that he had an article approved. Landon, I'm not sure. I don't recall off the top of my head if you got an article approved, but, you know, just be aware that that's, you know, a key avenue, a key aspect of the scoring process. Okay, whether you have an appropriate article or not. All right. Organization. So here what I'm looking for is, you know, the structure and flow of your summary. Do you have a clear introduction that explains how you are going to be approaching the information in the article? Okay. And then do you have some clear body paragraphs that elaborate on the things that you set out to discuss in your introduction, and then a clear conclusion that wraps up what you've discussed? You know, I always tell students, tell me the story of your article, right? And when I say organization and structure and flow, I am referring to the way you typically do things when you write an essay of some sort in an English class, right? Tell me what you're gonna tell me, and then tell me what you told me, right? Now, notice in this category, in terms of good, that one of the things I'm looking for is that you introduce the name of the article and the author right in the introduction. Well, if your first sentence is according to the requirements that I've spelled out, then you automatically meet that portion of the organization, right? Okay, that makes sense to everybody? Yeah, okay. And then the last category on this rubric is the mechanics and requirements. So under mechanics, I'm looking to see, you know, like things like grammar, right? Now, again, I'm not an English professor, and to be honest with you, I've long, you know, pretty much to me, like I read it and blatant things I will catch immediately, right? But some things that are more subtle that an English professor might spot right away, maybe I'm not as savvy as that, but obvious things like punctuation, capitalization, spelling. I once had a student give me a summary with no capitalization, no punctuation. I mean, the whole summary was just this massive run-on sentence. So, I mean, that's a drastic case, right? But there are some things that students do that a spell check and a grammar check, excuse me, could help you to avoid. So that's that mechanics part. The other thing is that I'll be looking to see, as far as requirements, is it long enough? Okay, because I would tell students the amount you short me on a length, I'm gonna deduct points, right? If you don't put sentences on a third page, you're automatically losing 5 points right there because it's not meeting the length standard. If if it's shorter than that, where you don't even fill up the bottom of the second page, then you'll probably be losing 10 or more points, right? So it's important that you put those, you make it long enough, your summary long enough to extend to 4 to 5 sentences on a third page. The other thing under requirements that I'll look for is, do you have a properly formatted reference page? And it tells you that in the project details. If you don't include a reference page, you lose 5 points. Okay, if that reference page is included, but it's not properly formatted, depends on the degree of, formatting issues. That will dictate how many points you lose there. And you must include a full copy of the article, or a functioning link to a full copy of the article. If you don't include that, you will lose 5 points. Okay. So are there questions about the mechanics requirements category? All right. So I think with that, I'm gonna stop the share. I want to give opportunities for you to ask any questions that you might be having at this point, because I'm while you're working on this over the break, I want to make sure you have the information that you need. So any questions? Yeah. All right. So here's the thing. You have to make a commitment to me that while you're working on this summary, if you run into questions at any point, don't hesitate to reach out to me. Okay. You can reach me, email. If we need to set up an appointment to talk about it individually, we can definitely do that. The main thing is that it's too late to say, I wanted to ask that, I wasn't real sure, after you've submitted it. The time to get all of those things ironed out is before you hit go on it and turn it into me. Okay. And I'm more than willing to take time to work with you, independently on any questions that you might have, but you have to reach out to me in order to make that happen. The other thing that I just briefly wanted to touch on, and if you looked at the weekly overviews, and I apologize, I can't put that up on the screen right now, but if you looked at the weekly overviews, you pretty much see that waves, astronomy, and the applications overview are the only things we have left, which we will be getting into after the break. The waves application, the waves overview, you can go ahead and if you wanted to go ahead and start taking a look at that, that's fine. But we will definitely jump into it when we return from spring break. And the astronomy and applications overviews, you do on an independent kind of basis anyway. So waves is really what we have left to do, and we'll do that when we return. But I wanted to, you know, kind of give you the space to focus strictly on a project over the spring break, because I figure if you don't have other classes, that will probably be a really good time for you to work on that. I do apologize that, it will be part of spring break, but, at least then you won't have other classes to contend with while you're working on it. You can give some dedicated time to getting it all, getting your summary done. Right. So that's pretty much what I wanted to share with you tonight. Kind of, make sure you had information on the project, the actual summary, the scoring, the idea of avoiding plagiarism. And with that, I'll just say whatever your questions are, I'm open to them. All right, well, John and Landon, I appreciate you joining in as usual. You're both faithful about being here. I hope you have a good rest of your week and a good spring break. And I will be checking email faithfully, so don't worry about me not seeing it over spring break.
All right. Yeah, I'm sure I'll be hitting you up with a few questions.
Okay, no problem. I'm more than available to.
Yeah, it just always happens when I start getting into it.
Yeah, of course. I mean, as they say, the devil is in the details, right? All right, so y'all both take care. I'll post this recording. And don't forget, in the announcements, there are other recordings that relate to the project, and there are sample videos that relate to, the topics that we have already covered, and even the topics that we have left on our plate. So if you trying to work ahead, you can always take a look at those videos. But I'll share this class video. Give me about a day or so, because it usually takes that long for me to get it captioned.
All right.
All right. Y'all have a great evening.
You too. Bye.
Bye now.